Welcome to It's Not What You Think with Mordy Levine, where we get to meet and talk to spiritual teachers from around the world. Our guests are from all walks of life, and we hear about how they got into spirituality, what motivates them to teach and do what they do, and how they navigate the world we all live in. This is episode 1, recorded on March 16th, 2021. My guest today is Bob Isaacson. We talk about how he is the second youngest attorney to present a case to the United States Supreme Court, a case which he won, by the way, how he advises his students and his work around the world with DVA, Dharma Voices for Animals. It's Not What You Think podcast is available on all streaming platforms, so please like, comment, share, or subscribe on your favorite platform. That support is enough to continue to allow us to produce this show. Bob Isaacson can be contacted via his website, dharmavoicesforanimals.org. This information can also be found in the description of this episode. Our interviews are with people who may have opinions different from yours or mine. So while we keep an open mind, just remember, it's not what you think. Okay, so my phone is off. You want to just check your phone?
Yeah, and I did. So I just moved the
Okay,
other
great.
side of the room. Should be safe. Well, it does surprise me every now and then.
If it happens, it happens. Not a big deal.
Put a pillow on it. Come on.
Bob, we're professionals.
Yes, that's right. We have to keep that in mind.
We can handle those unexpected.
Yeah, it could even happen to professionals too, Morty. That's the amazing thing. I think they call it a Nietzsche.
That's true. I call it Annika because I don't speak Sanskrit. Anyways, okay, here we go.
Anita and Nietzsche.
3, 2, 1. So this week we are welcoming Bob Isaacson. Bob Isaacson was a civil rights, human rights attorney for 25 years, specializing in defending people against the death penalty. He presented and won a landmark case in the Supreme Court of the United States, which limits the power of the police to arrest people without sufficient grounds when he was 27 years old, the second youngest attorney in history to appear before the nation's highest court. I guess the question is, how come I'm not interviewing the first youngest attorney? But that's
you know who that is? It's the person who argued Roe versus Wade. But for years, I thought I was the youngest because that was argued twice. The second time she argued it, she was a few months older than when I argued my case. But the first time, she was a year younger.
Spoken.
So she gets
clarified like a true attorney. Thank you. Bob is also president and co-founder of Dharma Voices for Animals, DVA, the only international Buddhist animal rights, animal advocacy organization in the world. Your organization engages Buddhist centers around the world to actively advocate for animals, educate and help Buddhist teachers, honor and respect Buddhist teachings on do no harm, which of course includes the animal kingdom. That website is dharmavoicesforanimals.org. And of course, you lead several sanghas, groups of practitioners, in teaching them Buddhist teachings and various retreats and how to meditate and all that. So welcome, Bob, to It's Not What You Think.
Thank you, Morty. It's good to be here with you.
Great. So how was your week? Another week in the pandemic that's going on forever. How is it going out there with the pandemic?
It's pretty good. It's also nice to look outside and see a cloudless sky, about 85, I'll say about 65, 67 degrees. So it's going well. You know, it was difficult. I think practicing Dharma for a number of years really helped with restlessness and all that comes up. I mean, a lot of suffering, of course, this last year. So my heart goes out to all those that have had a really difficult time.
Yeah, definitely. As my teacher says, Lama Lanang, he says, hey, this is a real teaching. Getting through this, or another way of looking at it, this is just another form of the bardo. The gap in between, it's typically used as, the gap in between life and rebirth, but you can use that word any moment of transition, any gap.
Yeah.
So, and as you know, I'm a huge fan of DVA because I'm a big believer in doing what we can to respect the animal kingdom and reduce harm. They're sentient beings just like us. So we'll talk more about that. So, how did you first get into this whole meditation thing? I mean, does this stuff really work, or is it just kind of some pseudoscience?
So, life was going pretty well. And I really had very little spiritual connection really to anything. But I had this feeling for a few years. This is maybe about 25, 26 years ago, that something was missing in my life. Something was missing. Um, as I looked more carefully at that, and my wife actually came home one day with a book, Introduction to Buddhism. And I took a look at it. I got interested by a Tibetan teacher, although I don't remember the name. I thought, this is really interesting. Like maybe, maybe connecting this kind of feeling of unsatisfactoriness with Dharma teaching. And I'd seen the film, I read the book, read the Siddhartha, many, many years before. And I remember when I read it, I thought, wow, I found something. And that was the last I thought about it for 20 years. So this reconnected me, this reading of the book my wife brought back, reconnected me with what was there for me, looking at the path via Siddhartha. So I got into it. We actually went to, there's a Chinese Buddhist, the Buddhist Light Association here in San Diego. They have a temple, and they had a English-speaking Sunday Dharma teaching. So we went to that. Did some readings, and then went to a second intermediate group, and so things started happening. And then they started opening retreat centers. This is like in the 90s. I started going on a retreat. I found Spirit Rock. Just the internet was just beginning then. So I did phone calls, waited for the prompt. If you want extension number 27, it'll give you the information on the schedule. So I followed that. I started going up to Spirit Rock in the mid 90s, and I found it. So this is, of course, a different tradition than that was. It was Pure Land. I believe
yeah, of course, right, of course. So,
yeah.
So when you first went there, and do you remember the very first time you closed your eyes and someone maybe gave you instructions or didn't? Do you remember that? Or
what I remember, Morty, was being surprised that I could not control my thoughts. That I would sit there. The instruction was to sit and just to be present. And they might have added a breath, be mindful of the breath. And the mind did not do what I wanted it to. I was perplexed by this. I couldn't understand it. Then I started hearing that this was not unusual. It wasn't some strange experience I was having.
That's very funny. I had a slightly different experience. When I was in graduate school, I took a karate class, and it was very traditional Japanese karate. Some classes, they didn't even speak English. And at the beginning of class, we'd sit in seiza, we'd sit on our knees, and they'd give a command in Japanese, and we'd close our eyes, but there was no instruction. And after class, we'd do the same thing, zero instruction. We did that for years.
No, what do you do?
What am I supposed to be doing here? And it wasn't like we had the internet where you can kind of look it up or anything. You had a book or you didn't have a book. And then I think years later, I had some difficulty. Maybe I broke up with a girlfriend, something like that. And I called my teacher, my sensei, and I said, I'm very upset. He goes, oh, just sit seiza for a couple of minutes. And I did it, and I hated it, and I got nothing out of it. So it took me a number of years later until I got some instruction before I benefited from it. But it sounds like you kind of you touched something right away, which of course in some ways resonated with you, but in some ways was like, okay, this isn't working. This should be easy. What's going on here?
That's it. I mean, I thought, and the first thing I thought was I'm doing something wrong. Why my mind, I should be able to control my mind. So then I did a little more reading and went on a weekend retreat, a couple of them here in San Diego and elsewhere. And it was a Tibetan tradition, also Zen. And then I found the Vipassana Theravada. But the answer is the same. The mind, of course, cannot be controlled. That's the insight. But first, just to see that the mind cannot be controlled, that thoughts will happen when the conditions are right, was absolutely huge. I couldn't really put it in any perspective at the time, but I could tell it was something important that I was learning.
Yeah, and that's super interesting that you recognized this is I don't want to say it's a problem, but this is interesting. What's going on here? I wouldn't have expected this. My experience was that when I do have these these times of silence or quiet while I'm meditating, they're really, now it's kind of obvious that, okay, I had a good meditation. I didn't have, you kind of know. But back then, you know, my expectations were so high that I just missed the boat.
Mm.
You know, I didn't really know, oh, this is it. This is, on one hand, this is all there is. On the other hand, it's pretty subtle. For me, it was. So it was too subtle that I didn't even recognize it
Yeah.
until years later when someone gave me some instruction. And then, of course, I'm guessing weeks or months after that, I started to realize, oh, there's some gaps here. Oh, this is interesting. Oh, and that's when, of course, I started to recognize the value, because until then I was just kind of operating on faith that this was going to do something.
Right, which is really important. This faith piece, and it develops. It's faith based on evidence and learning and all that. It's not blind faith. It's being asked of us, as you know, and it's it's seeing that what we're experiencing is not unusual. There's actually a reason why we can't control our thoughts, which is the beauty of Sangha. And I know you know this, and I have found my Sangha, greater Sangha, now I'm teaching, is so that people can talk to others and listen to others speaking and sharing their own experiences, that what they're experiencing is not so unusual. There's nothing wrong with us when we're having these experiences. We're not inadequate as meditators or as people. And then then to listen to the teachings that give us kind of a roadmap of what we're experiencing, so we can lead to freedom. It's the path to freedom, which is the Buddhist teachings.
Yeah, it's my favorite word. I used to call it, when I would teach, oh, you want to be happier, happiness, da, da, da. I no longer like that word. I
Mm.
prefer the word freedom, or liberation's a little too fancy, but I like, it's a freeing feeling. It's a freeing feeling.
Yeah.
Happiness can mean so many different things, but freedom is, you could be very sad, but you're free.
Yeah.
I'm not happy so-and-so is dead, but so that I really love the word freedom in that regard, because happiness, especially in the West, I think means something very specific. I won the lottery, so I'm happy. I had a good meal, so I'm happy. And that's true. But of course, we know that's very limited happiness. But freedom is, covers all bases, and it means something different than happiness.
It does, and this is what you're saying is a freedom, a freeing or a liberating experience. When we realize we don't have to have this constant getting what we want and not getting what we don't want, keeping at bay unpleasant and holding on to pleasant to be happy. We just accept and just be. And that's the path. The Four Noble Truths. How liberating is that? We don't have to be anything. We don't have to do anything. Just experience life and learn this kind of acceptance, is the way I put it. Equanimity with what our experiences are. We're gonna have 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows. Some of us have more sorrows than others. Some of us have more joys than others. But we're gonna get a lot of both. It's really about how we deal with this. That's the practice, how we deal with each experience. As I understand, that's my understanding of the practice. Yeah.
Bob, if you make a mistake on anything, I'll let you know.
I
thought it was five.
I'll be waiting for that.
I thought it was 5 noble truths, actually. No. So did you have a root teacher or a main teacher at some point?
Yeah, so it actually took a while to find one, but about 20 years ago, I connected with Guy Armstrong at Spirit Rock. Guy was a monk in the 1980s with Ajahn Buddhadasa, one of the great Thai forest masters. And he's been on staff there at Spirit Rock and also Insight Meditation Society in Massachusetts. So I've sat for at least 2 years, in attending retreats, at least 2 years at Spirit Rock. You put them all together, 1 month here, 2 months there, and another year at Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts. So Guy he's a wonderful teacher. He just published a book a couple years ago called Emptiness, which is really,
I have it.
Highly recommend that.
Absolutely. I love it. I have it. It's easy to read on such a topic that's not necessarily, that's not on the surface easy.
I'm really happy you had a chance to read that. And then he and I have been doing a check-in every month for the last 20 years. When we're not, we do it on the phone for about an hour, or Zoom. We did Zoom just a week ago, yesterday. Or I'm sitting on retreats with him. Also, major teachers for me were Joseph Goldstein and Carol Wilson. Those are my three main teachers. But Guy and I have a special relationship, and he's guided me and led me into the teaching as a layperson. It's authorized by Spirit Rock, but I teach here in San Diego. So that's been really important, as you know how important. So in the Theravadan tradition, yeah, sure, there are monastics that are teachers to so many people, and I've sat retreats with Burmese masters, Thai masters, Tibetan master Tsoknyi Rinpoche. I sat at Dzogchen retreat with Tsoknyi about 20 years ago. So I've had a lot of different experiences, but the one constant thing is for the last 20 years has been working with Guy, who's really, really inspired me and supported my practice.
What's interesting and what I like about that is, we're teachers, or, you're more active, of course, than I am, but we're also students. And that's something that's, I think, somewhat unique to I don't want to say Buddhism, but really unique to the Eastern philosophy. Not so unique maybe in the Western world, where, because in the Western world, once you're a teacher, you're a master, you're good. Everyone kind of that's it, you're done, you're kind of done. But we have this lineage of teacher, student, et cetera. And that helps to continue to learning, helps to, I think, keep us humble, because, there's someone who's a little bit, I don't want to say better, but knows more.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go to, and you have that support. And I think just by being in a lineage is really very strong a way to lead one's life.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's talk about your day-to-day. Let's talk about your off the cushion practice, not your meditation. Everyone, sitting on the cushion, when 5, 6, 7 in the morning before the house holds up, I don't want to say it's easy, but that's a lot easier than getting out into the world and interacting with people.
Mm-hmm.
and things go wrong. So, what do you do? What's your go-to when you notice that you're stressed or you're angry or irritated about, something? What do you do to help yourself?
Yeah, the first thing I do is hopefully recognize it. So when we're not mindful, when things are happening, but we're not aware of what's actually happening, it's pretty hard to find a skillful response, skillful way to be with that experience. So it takes the mindfulness, and when the mind is lost or kind of in confusion, it's difficult. But the more we practice, the easier it is to find a place of mindfulness. So once the mindfulness is there, what I like to do when there's difficulty, it might just be calling a credit card company and saying, I paid that bill on time. I really did. Take a look. It's postmarked, or I'm paying now, of course, online. And they go, no, you get $100 fine. It's not the $100. It's, come on. Can't you see this? And so to see that frustration, but then not to react. The person on the other end of the phone is just trying to do their job and all. So it's to notice that there's a reaction there, to notice that there is frustration or anger or whatever it is. And then there's actually a 4-part test, which is not easy to do in real time, but you have to practice this on the cushion. And it goes by the acronym RAIN, R-A-I-N. You probably have heard of this.
Sure.
And R is recognition, so it's simple frustration or a judgment or self-righteousness. That's the R. A is acceptance. So a lot of times, much of the time, just the mere mindfulness, the bare mindfulness is enough to free the mind, and acceptance is there. But sometimes it takes more than that when we're really caught. The I is investigation. So this is one of the 7 factors of awakening that the Buddha taught. Investigation meaning not how did this happen, but what is happening? What is happening right now? What's happening in the body and in the mind? Mind thoughts, and emotions. So you can actually do this in just a couple seconds, but you need to pause to be able to see it. And the final R, recognition, A, acceptance, I, investigation, N is non-identification. We could say non-self-identification. When it's my anger, when I'm right, we're caught. But when it's anger has arisen or frustration has arisen, not to take it personally, because we all have these experiences, that is the non-recognition that is being talked about. So if I have a few seconds, and this is not easy to do, sometimes if things are happening quickly, just the recognition is enough to give some space to be able to act skillfully and without reaction, which just makes things much worse for ourselves, as you know, and for others.
So you have a checklist. I don't know if it's popular, but I've certainly read about it over the years. Was that developed? Of course, it goes back to the Buddha's days, but was that developed by Tara Brach?
It wasn't. Tara Brach's a wonderful teacher.
Or did she
she's
probably wrote about
one of my
it?
teachers. Yeah, actually.
Okay.
And also Dharma Voices for Animals, huge
Right.
activist. This was actually Michelle McDonald Smith. I think she goes
Okay.
by Michelle McDonald now, who was a teacher, not sure if she's active now, at Insight Meditation Society.
Okay, so she created this.
Exactly, and it's a compilation of the Buddhist teachings. The Buddha taught all this, of course, but he never put them together in this way that I'm aware of. But she did. So this is just a way to practice. It's easy to remember, and I learned this from my teachers, and I of course teach it to others.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. Hits all the bases, gives you the pause buttons. It's a great checklist, easy to remember, et cetera, et cetera. And I think from the limited time that I used it years ago, once you kind of get into that rhythm of RAIN, it, like you said, it's a 5-10 second thing until you can kind of maybe, regain your balance, for lack of a better word. So that checklist, you're working with your mind. It sounds like exclusively. What I like, and God knows there's a million different ways to approach it, although we tend to ignore all of them when we're really angry. But I like combining the body. So I like incorporating the breath and the breathing. So, but even before we talk about that, what I also like is you spent most of the time in describing it it's really preparation. You have to see it coming. Mm-hmm. Or you have to recognize when you're angry or irritated. And sometimes we don't even see that, but that's almost, I don't want to say half the battle. That might be 80-90% of the battle. Because if you don't recognize, you don't see it coming, then you're in it and you're miserable, or you don't even know you're miserable. So that takes mindfulness, which of course comes from meditation and just observing your thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. And just one more thing, Morty, I completely agree with that. And it can be just a few seconds with practice. So if you go to the RAIN, investigation is both of the body and the mind. Okay. So to see, and I didn't spend a lot of time talking about that. So for me, if it's anger, it's in the chest. I feel tightness, shoulders and neck. That's where I often feel it. So just a quick check-in. And sometimes even before I know I'm angry, I can feel the tightness. And then go, oh yeah, anger. So like you said, that's oftentimes all you need to do is just the recognition. Sometimes it's important to go a little bit deeper than that if we're really stuck.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like one of my favorites, and I have lots of different tools. One of my favorites is, once you observe that you've been triggered, is to take a few breaths and then to observe the breathing in and out of the area where you feel the stress. Mm-hmm. Very simple. So, and why do these tools work? I think they work because it breaks the habit. It breaks the habit of, what's the habit? The habit is something happened, I'm irritated. Something happened, could be the woman on the credit card line. It could be some thought that popped into my mind. So something happened and I'm irritated. And it breaks that habit, the trigger, because now instead of going down the road we would normally go down, which is being angry, irritated, and upset, we've stopped. And so that's number one. Number two, the mind, we've stopped the mind from going down that road. Now it's going to go down some other road, RAIN road, or then I like the breathing or touching base with the body, because the breathing and the mind connecting together brings you into the moment. And that being, if you're in the present moment, then you can't be thinking about something else like how annoyed you are.
Yeah.
So that's another beautiful part of it, is it brings you into the present moment. And as my teacher says, the present moment is a gift. So, so that and what you're describing with the I, or the RAIN, also brings you into the present moment, because you're kind of checking in a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. In the present moment, we can deal with, we can handle lots of suffering as long as we're there and we're not trying to escape or get away from it or find some other solution. Just being there. Things are not as bad as they seem if we can just be present with them. And it's not easy, as you say. Habits of mind are really difficult to break. This practice, the RAIN practice that I described, the practices you're describing, are all about being in the present moment in order to cut the chain of habits in the mind, because the habits just lead us to suffering. So this is the Buddhist path. It's right at the heart of the Four Noble Truths as well.
Yeah, yeah. So you're leading a couple of sanghas now, or at least one. What is do you get new students? Or is it just the same group of people? And if so, what is your typical new student like?
Yeah, so good question about new students. So I had two sanghas that met separately at different days of the week, different weeks. But since COVID, we started a Zoom sangha, and then so I have two sanghas have become one on Thursday nights, which has been very nice. I'm wondering what we'll do when there's no longer pandemic issues going on. And that's a challenge. So what I've been doing over the years, and this came from is I teach a 6-week introductory course. And it's, I can just real quickly go through it. First is mindfulness, what we've been talking about. Second is the Four Noble Truths. Third week are the 3 characteristics. So it's impermanence, not self, and suffering. The fourth week is how to practice with body pain on the one hand and emotional distress on the other. The fifth week are the precepts, the 5 precepts, the guide to moral conduct in the Buddhist path. And the sixth are the Brahma Viharas. So I think in Tibetan, they might call them the imponderables. But these are, metta, loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And so this is it. I just taught one recently at Insight San Diego. It was 6 weeks on Zoom. It was in November and December. And from that, I picked up some new members of Sangha. And then word of mouth. People are liking the experience. I've been working with some students for 10 years or longer. And then they'll tell their friends. And then their friends will get involved and either stay with us or not.
So what kind of issues, and now, of course, when you're not, when you meet in person, before the class, after the class, you stand, you talk, you socialize, you get to know people informally. So, what kind of issues or baggage do new students bring with them? What are they expecting from you or from the class? Or are these just people that have been doing, that's in Buddhism somewhere else, and now they're going to come and try this flavor?
Yeah, so for many years, I would say when people ask, what's your Sangha like? I would respond, well, it's for beginners and more experienced people. I never say advanced because just more experience,
right.
You some practice. And now I tend to say you need a little bit of experience because I've had a number of students, one in particular, one of my sanghas, and I think you know this, was at the Unitarian Universalist
Sure, of course.
here in Solana Beach.
Yeah.
I've been there for 12 years now. And so during the pandemic, somebody contacted the office and asked if there was a Buddhist meditation group, got my email address and emailed me. Very excited about coming. They came from a Buddhist country, Asian American. He had wanted to get back in touch with their roots. They described to me. This seemed a beautiful experience. So invited that person to join our Sangha. And after the first one, we go into the teachings, and I try to make it accessible to all levels. But I can't keep talking about what mindfulness is when we're talking about, there has to be some level of experience so it's really understandable. Otherwise, everyone else feels like they're not really getting very far with the teachings. And then after she just said, this is too much for me. I don't know what's going on. So I realized that somebody who was really a beginner in the practice would not, oftentimes is not such a good fit. But you don't have to be very experienced, just a little bit, having meditated a bit. So I think there's some, to answer your question more directly, there's some level of experience that's needed. You have to try meditation, have some familiarity with the teachings, or be willing to look after the class, after our Sangha meetings or before, to try to understand the teachings. Otherwise, you'd be 10 years behind some of the people that are there. But it still is accessible for newer students and for older students. I try to make it that way.
Yeah, it's no different than, you're going to take a tennis lesson. You're going to be in there with the advanced people, and you can barely hit a forehand or a backhand. It's going to be frustrating. And that's why I think some sanghas have first Wednesday is beginners, and then I know in the Sangha that I'm associated with, we go out of our way to talk to new people before or after their first class, because we know, where I go, it's Tibetan Buddhism, which also is like its own religion in some. I'm joking, but we know that it's a different language, it's a different mindset, and half of the conversation is to assure them that we're there to support them, and the other half is, can I answer any questions for you?
Yeah,
that kind of thing. So
this is good. And just to say that I do that. It's really good to follow up with new people. Otherwise, they're just they don't feel connected usually. So
I don't see you taking notes when I mention some of these great tips for you.
I have photographic memory.
So do you ever get a call? I'm not actively teaching anymore, but you ever get a call from a student or a friend or a loved one who's really going through a difficult time, and you kind of have to talk them down, so to speak? I hate to use the words Buddhist psychology, but as a teacher, people look up to you and they think you know all the answers, especially when they're suffering. So, is there anything you can share with us about any interesting experience that happened in that realm?
Yeah. Yes. So I've had quite a few. Two of them I want to share. Maybe I can share two, because they're very different. So one happened maybe about 2 years ago. A student I've been working with at the time about 9 years. I knew her well, and it gets all I'm going to say. It's confidential, but the story is not. It's a common story. Could happen to anybody, and there's no way to identify who this could have happened to. Was in a really, really difficult panic attack or terror attack, I would say. Really had trouble breathing, and I knew about this through interviews or check-ins that we did over the years, and called me in the middle of one of these panic attacks, and some really serious stuff was going on. So first of all, I asked if she had any other resources to talk to. I'm not a psychologist, and this was a serious situation. There wasn't, and I had to do something. So I just talked to her about breathing. And I said, can you just feel your breath? Can you just feel your body? It's going to be okay. And I talked to her as best I could the first time I'd ever tried this. And she was out of the danger zone. And then everything was fine after that, the last time I checked in. I was actually driving my car, and I saw and I didn't know why I would be contacted. So I thought it might be something serious or important. I pulled over, and we had to talk. And I was, very happy and relieved, of course, that the crisis, when the crisis was over. The second situation I wanted to share was something that happened just in the last 4 or 5 months. One of my students has a second home in the Great Northwest. And with the fires up there, the house burned to the ground. And and the person has an important position out there in the world, and papers and items and things, and then all photographs, and lost everything. And still had, luckily, it was a second home, still had a home here. And she was really advanced in the practice, and it just took some reminders to it wasn't a crisis situation, but she was really terribly sad and anxious about that. So I just offered my support. We talked about it a bit, reminded her of the teachings and the best way, the most skillful way to be with this. And we did a lot of metta for herself, and metta being loving kindness, and also karuna, or compassion, for herself. And she wanted to do it for all her neighbors and all, which is great. I just asked her just to stay with herself. The Buddha reminded us that we could look through the entire universe and find no one more deserving of our love and compassion than ourselves. So just sometimes we need to be reminded of that. And she's actually doing wonderfully now. Insurance will take over, and this crisis is over. But those were two really heartbreaking situations.
Yeah. I mean, what's beautiful about it is they're getting two things. One is, of course, they're getting the teachings and the benefit of the tools and the techniques and and the experience and all that. But they're also hearing, I think, your voice, which is a voice of experience, a voice of comfort, whatever a meditation teacher or a Buddhist teacher brings to the table. Mm-hmm. And I think that combination can be very, very helpful. One without the other, it may not be enough. So those are beautiful stories, and that's kind of what we're here for, I think, as teachers, and frankly, as Buddhists, is to reduce suffering. So those are great examples of that. I've had moments I'm sure we've all had, anxiety, irritation, whatever, over the years, and the tools and techniques, they do what they do, and they can help put a little, balm or a little bit salve, on the injury. But I remember after we shut down in March of last year, a couple of weeks later, I remember waking up at 2 a.m. with, never had it before, but full blown panic attack. And I was like, I'd never had that before. And the feeling was one like, this is my new life, the way I feel now. And then there was a teeny tiny little voice in the back of my mind going, the observer or the witness saying, hey, this is what you were trained for. This is how you feel now, but this is not your new life. So why don't we do this all happened in a fraction of a second. Why don't you do one of the techniques? So of course I did, a breathing technique, and then, lying in bed. And I remember a few things about it. I'll go cut to the chase. After about 20, 25 minutes, I felt totally normal. It was amazing. I was shocked. The second thing I remember is that after a minute or two, I didn't feel better. And I remember, because why? Because in the past, all of the techniques that I'd used equivalent to the RAIN, they were all for a minute or two. If I was meditating on the cushion, of course, that would be half hour, whatever it is, 2 hours. But all the other techniques that you use during the day, they're pretty quick, because you just go about doing your business, and you have your physical body, so you move around. So things get better pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. But here, because I was lying in bed, didn't really have the use of my physical body so much to walk around, to exercise, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So I was just surprised that it took me more than a couple of minutes. Naive is probably a better word, even after 40 years of practice, to think that I was going to get better. But I just stayed with it, and I had enough faith in the technique and because I'd done it before, that after, the shocking part is I went from 1,000 down to 0. Took about 20, 25 minutes. And since then I've had it maybe 2 other times, not as severely, but all you have to do is get through it once to have, which to have enough faith in it. And I got through it thousands of times, but on a very, very short scale. And here it was really fully blown out. Which I think is really much more common for especially what's going on now with the pandemic and the unemployment, people losing their jobs and things like that. And we had, at that moment, we lost our company. So, there was reason to, we closed down, everyone, told all people go home. So there was definitely reason to be anxious. But, 2 a.m, it was really, really quite an experience, both a negative and a positive. So it was a good learning for me.
One thing you mentioned, Mordy, in sharing that is confidence or faith, and it's really important. On retreat, I've experienced all of that a number of times. Terror, fear, and all this stuff comes up. And when it's happening, you think it's gonna. The first thought is it's gonna last forever. That's it. That's your experience the rest of your life. But then that little, as you point out, that little ray of light or little opening. Now it's going to pass. So now what do? And just having the confidence, the wherewithal to try it, to try to get away from the story just creating the suffering, and then the suffering is creating the story, and it's a circle of suffering. The thoughts feed the emotions feeds the thoughts. Just let's do this, right? This is what we practice for. And once your point was, once you do it and you see that it's not as bad as it seems to be, then that gives us confidence to the next time it happens. And that's what we're doing. The reason we practice meditation is not so that we can be good meditators, so that's important, but that we can lead a life, skillful and a way to contribute to society. And as the Buddha would say, to lead a life that can support the freedom of all beings. That's why we practice. But you actually have to do it when it's difficult. It's hard. It's really hard. It's so important.
Yeah, I think it's hard for lots of reasons. One is, habituated. Number 2 is that's my anger. Number 3 is you think you're sunk. But I think the beauty of, doing the practice over and over again is you recognize that it's your anger. You don't have to feel that way. You just got to do the work, or do the practice, or do what you've been training to do. So it's good to hear those stories, because it's, I think the other part of what you and I both enjoy is, you help someone and you reduce their suffering. And that's like, what can be better than that? I don't think there can be anything better than that. All right, let's talk about DVA, Dharma Voices for Animals. So you started that in 2011. And basically, your organization tries to get other Buddhist teachers and centers to honor the Buddhist teachings on non-harming of all sentient beings, including animals, which of course means eating no animals as well. Did I explain that correctly?
Beautiful.
Okay.
That's really good.
Okay,
I especially like the part where you said, of course, it means eating no animals.
Right,
That's a good place to start.
Right. And full disclosure, I am we both know, I'm a financial supporter of DVA as well. So I'm putting my money where my mouth is, literally and figuratively. So what kind of feedback do you get from Buddhist groups who serve meat at their retreats?
Yeah. So this is where they say the rubber meets the road. Different in different cultures. So let's start out here in our culture in the U.S. We have had good success working kind of quietly behind the scenes with some of the bigger centers, and going in and just trying to have a conversation with people. Try to do it in a non-judgmental way, asking questions. Is it possible to, sometimes we'll ask, serve less animal flesh, or it might be to serve no animal flesh, or it might even be to serve vegan, plant-based options to a completely vegetarian menu. So when we do this, people tend to be, if we can get our foot in the door so that we can have a conversation, which is what we have a huge campaign that we are in the first stages of right now, trying to do this with, we have 1,000 centers that we have in our database. So we've had both good success and not so good success. So immediately people feel judged often. The manager of the retreat, the abbot, the head monastic, the chairman of the board of directors, the supervisor in the kitchen, whoever is the decision maker on what food is being offered, even when the intention, and sometimes I have the conversations and sometimes as part of our team, usually they feel judged. So from our point of view, all we can do is to be sure that we're speaking from the heart. And then we really can't control how people are going to view our message. Mm-hmm. Listening is very important, to listen to people, to see what it is and why it is that they are not say practicing to the full extent of the Buddhist teachings. They really are doing things leading to suffering. And it might be that they're afraid they're going to lose their Sangha, that people won't come unless they serve their favorite chicken or hamburger or other food. So it's really it's listening and trying to start a conversation. It's also persistence. And so back to your question, circling back to that, it's if we did what you wanted us to do, Bob, at DVA, then less people would come to our retreat and less people would pay to support our center here, and we would eventually go out of business. So if you unpack that, it's a fear for sure, but it's probably not based on so much evidence. If we're just asking people to serve vegetarian, and for a week retreat, very few people would quit the retreat center for that. And then people have dietary issues. This is a very common. We can't change because we can't say no animal flesh served, because some people need that for their diet. So I have questions about that, whether people really need to eat animal flesh, but we don't even have to go into that if people are told by their doctor. So it's okay that you make an exception for a person. So those are the most common ones. We're going to lose our money. We'll lose our Sangha if we start serving food that is compassionate, not based on harming animals. Second, we have special needs people who have to eat certain diets. And third, it's the third one, which I didn't mention, is kind of a pain in the butt to do this. We don't know how to cook food that's totally vegetarian or in some cases plant-based. So what are we going to do? So our answer to the last question is we're working with a wonderful organization called Balanced. So balance with a D on the end, balanced.org, by Audrey Sanchez. She's the founder and the CEO, the executive director, actually, and they specialize in website support, recipes, online cooking courses, teachings to support organizations that are transitioning from offering food that supports harm to offering food that does not support harm.
Perfect.
So we got that. That's in the process now, and I'm going to talk to our communications director after you and I finish talking. And this is going to happen. We'll probably have this up and running in the next few weeks.
Perfect. Wow, great solution. Yeah, and we've talked about this. Sometimes I'll speak for myself, look at the world black and white, and it ain't just that way for a lot of people. So it's good to be able to open up our minds a little bit and recognize that, hey, not everyone sees the world that way. And we have to be able to not talk down to people, but be skillful about it, because these are real, in their mind, these are real issues.
Yes.
So just because in our mind, they're not real issues, doesn't change anything in their mind. And like you said, you mentioned the word listening, and I think listening is important. It's an understated skill. And I think you get a lot more out of listening to hear what are valid issues for them. And then depending on how good you can communicate, how skillful you can be communicating, that's how you'll make progress. And it's not done overnight, as we both know. It could take years or just little incremental steps.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned Tara Brock before. Tara is on our team. We're really happy to have her, and she's incredibly helpful and a wonderful supporter. just to try to have conversation. That's the starting point. Because a lot of the centers say, we're not talking to you. This is it. They're afraid and there's fear, and all. And what do you do? I mean, you keep trying, but you don't want to make a nuisance of yourself.
Of
Sometimes you have
course.
to be persistent.
Right.
And then, can I just also just mention other countries? So we're,
Sure.
as you know, Morty, so we talked about a number of times. We also have large projects in Sri Lanka, Buddhist country. 70% of the country, it's a Theravadan country, and actually has the longest uninterrupted Buddhist sangha in the world, so over 2,300 years. Thailand's close behind. We also have a project in Thailand and also in Vietnam. In Sri Lanka, it's really hard to say. So it's a country of 21 million people. It's an island nation. It's right off the coast, the southern eastern coast of India. It's hard to say what percentage are vegetarian. And by the way, they have the same word for vegetarian as they do for vegan. So not much distinguishing.
Got it.
And our board member, my good friend Bhante Sati, Sri Lankan American monk, he estimates about 25 to 30% of the monastics and the country are vegetarian. He might be a little bit optimistic. Some people think maybe more about 15%. But the important point is, if you go to talk to people about this, they're completely open to it. They understand that it's when you're eating animals and serving them, it's terrible for the animals. That there's an uneasy feeling about this, and for me, it clearly violates the ethical principles of the Buddhist teachings and the direct teachings in the Mahayana, and et cetera, et cetera. But so there's an openness to talk about this. You don't get the same response or a similar response in Sri Lanka, a Buddhist country, that we do in the United States. It's not, we shouldn't be talking about this. It's okay. I'll listen to you. I see what we can do. Do I have to do it all at once? No. Just incrementally. Okay. And we haven't met a single monk. They have a hierarchy of monastics in their country, and we talked to all the top monks in the 3 lineages in the country, and none of them. I think one is not vegetarian, 2 are. But they're not resistant to our doing this. So we're all over the place talking to people. So it's really different there than it is.
Sure. I think we are so far removed in the United States from the manufacturing and the killing that we just go to the store and there it is. And how dare you take that away from me? And I think in the Eastern countries, they see they're closer to that, to the land and to the animals. And to the slaughter. So they have a better understanding of that. Okay, no, thank you for sharing that with us. So as you know, the Dalai Lama was supposed to join us today. I didn't tell you that part for this podcast, but he couldn't make it. So if you had one question for the Dalai Lama, or if there's just one thing you wanted to say to the Dalai Lama, question or comment, anything comes to mind? I know we didn't talk about this in the pre-interview, so trying to give you a few more seconds here to think about it.
Question like that. All right, let me see what I would do. Well, I would ask him what he would say to his followers if they asked him, would the Buddha want me as a practitioner, asking you, Your Holiness the Dalai Lama, what would he say to me if I asked him, should I be vegetarian?
Okay. I think I could probably look that up on the internet and see what he said, because I'm sure years ago someone asked him that. No, I don't know. But I'll make sure that next time he's on the podcast, we'll get that question in there. So is there anything else I should have asked that I didn't, or something you don't want to say to help others, with their suffering, their fears, their stresses, anything else that comes to mind that I may have missed? I missed plenty, or did I get it all?
I think you did one heck of a job in talking to me, and you didn't take a full hour. I mean, I'm pretty happy with the way this went.
Good. Well, this has been a wonderful, a pure joy.
For me too.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us, and it's good to see you as always, and look forward to seeing you in person.
Yeah,
maybe
look
next
forward to that. So
weeks
as
or
soon
months
as
or
we
so.
can, let's do that. Thanks a lot for inviting me. I had
Stay
a
safe.
really good chat, really good time, Morty. Take
Stay
care.
safe, Bob. Thank you. Be well. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed our talk with Bob Isaacson. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the It's Not What You Think podcast. That really helps us continue to produce these episodes and invite other guests from around the world. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or would like to hear any specific guests on the podcast, please share my email, mordylevine@gmail.com, or visit mordylevine.com. Remember, it's not what you think.